The phone rang just as I was drying my hands from the breakfast dishes. It was my younger son, Noah the pilot. His voice, usually so bright, was low and urgent. "Mom, something's wrong. Bianca is here, isn't she?" I froze. Of course she was. My daughter-in-law had just gone upstairs to shower. I could still hear the water running. But Noah whispered, his words slicing through me like ice. "That's impossible. I'm holding her passport. She just boarded my flight to Paris. I'm looking at her right now." And before I could breathe, the water upstairs stopped. Footsteps echoed down the hallway. Bianca's voice floated from the stairs, soft and casual. "Mom, who's on the phone?" My heart slammed against my chest. If she was standing in my kitchen, then who was the woman flying across the Atlantic with my son? Asterisk, if you're watching this video, please like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching my story of revenge from. I want to know how far it has reached. This morning, just like any other, I was rushing to do the dishes after breakfast. Asterisk, I gripped the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. My mind tried to explain it away. Maybe Noah saw someone else. Maybe the passport was a mistake. But the look in his voice, as you can hear a look in someone's voice, was deadly serious. "Mom," he said again, slower this time, "I swear to you, she's here on this plane. She's sitting in Tua, right beside a man in a navy suit. They're laughing together like a couple." A chill rippled through me. I opened my mouth to argue, to tell him he must be exhausted from the long hours of flying, but the sound of the shower upstairs cut off, and I heard the creak of the bathroom door. Bianca's footsteps floated down the hallway, soft against the polished hardwood. Her voice followed, warm, practiced, casual. "Mom, who's on the phone?" I swallowed hard. My throat felt like it was full of sand. Just a friend," I lied quickly, pressing the receiver closer to my chest. My voice trembled so badly I thought she would hear it in the next room. Noah's voice came through the line, harder now. "Mom, she is not in Charleston. She is here in Paris. Look again, please." My knees nearly gave way. I forced myself to step into the living room as Bianca peeked her head down the stairs, her long dark hair dripping against her blouse, a damp towel thrown around her shoulders. She smiled, sweet as ever, as though nothing in the world was wrong. I turned away before she could study my face. My heart was thundering, too loud. I whispered into the phone, "I'll call you back," and I hung up. The silence that followed was worse than the call itself. The house felt suddenly unfamiliar, like the walls were leaning closer, listening. I collapsed onto the sofa, staring at the family photos on the mantel. Marcus and Bianca on their wedding day. Little Lily in her school uniform. Noah in his crisp pilot's jacket. Every memory felt tainted now, blurred by Noah's words. A shadow passed in the hallway. Bianca appeared again, now in a clean blue dress, her hair still damp, her wicker basket swinging from her hand. She smiled like always. "Mom, I'm going to the market early. Do you want me to bring anything?" Her tone was so normal, so ordinary, that it made my skin crawl. My lips barely moved. "Tomatoes, just some tomatoes." She nodded and left through the front gate, her figure disappearing into the bright Charleston sun. I sat there, hands trembling, torn between two impossible truths. My son's voice from a Paris-bound plane, and the living woman I had just spoken to in my own kitchen. That was the moment I knew something was terribly, irreversibly wrong in my house. Asterisk, the afternoon sunlight streamed across my dining table, striping the wood in golden lines. I sat there for a long time after Bianca left, staring at the grain of the oak, trying to convince myself that Noah had been mistaken, but his words would not leave me. "She's in 2A. She's laughing with him like a couple." I forced myself to stand, to busy my hands with something ordinary. Lily's backpack was still on the chair from that morning. I opened it, looking for her homework folder. Maybe her bright scrawl would anchor me in reality. When I flipped through the pages, my breath caught. On one sheet, yesterday's spelling assignment was corrected in neat, right-handed handwriting, perfect, steady lines. On the next page, the handwriting wavered, uneven and slanted, as if written by a different person altogether. "Grandma," Lily's voice chimed suddenly from the doorway. She had come home earlier than I expected. Her small shoes thudded on the tile as she pulled out another notebook. "Look, Mom helped me last night, but today her writing was weird." "See?" Her innocent eyes looked up at me. I nodded too quickly, masking the tremor in my voice. "Your mom was probably tired, sweet." "Don't worry." But my chest tightened. Children don't invent things like that. That evening, Marcus came home late from the firm. We sat down together, him, exhausted, and Bianca, glowing as if she had spent the day at a spa rather than the market. She served dinner gracefully, but I watched her hands carefully. She picked up her fork with her left hand. For years I had seen her use her right. Bianca, Marcus laughed suddenly, noticing the same thing. Since when are you left? Her smile flickered, just for a second. Oh, I've been practicing, just for fun. She brushed it off, but her eyes darted to mine. For the briefest moment, they weren't the eyes of a daughter-in-law I had lived with for nearly a decade. They were sharp, unfamiliar. The next day, Mrs. Green, our neighbor, knocked on the door to return a dish. She chuckled lightly but added, "Funny, your daughter-in-law gave me this with her left hand yesterday. I thought she was right-handed." My heart lurched. I forced a polite laugh, thanked her, and closed the door quickly, my palms clammy. It was all so subtle. A fork in the wrong hand, a notebook with clashing handwriting, a neighbor's passing comment, none of it enough to accuse her, but together, the pieces began to grind in my head like gears, slowly locking into place. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling fan, the shadows slicing across my bedroom walls. Every smile Bianca gave, every soft word, now felt rehearsed, like lines in a play, and I couldn't shake the thought, if she could change her handwriting, her habits, even her moods, was she truly the woman I thought I knew it all? The next evening, the house settled into its familiar rhythm. Marcus, buried in his architectural sketches, Bianca in the kitchen humming softly, and Lily at the table coloring with her crayons. For a fleeting moment, I almost convinced myself everything was normal again, until Lily looked up with those big, curious eyes. "Grandma," she said suddenly, her little voice cutting through the quiet, "why is Mommy different every day?" The crayon slipped from her fingers and rolled across the floor. My heart lurched. I bent down to pick it up, buying a second to steady my voice. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" Lily shrugged, twisting a strand of hair around her finger. "Last night Mommy sang me to sleep. She sang 'You Are My Sunshine,' the way you used to sing to Daddy when he was little. She hugged me really tight. But tonight," her voice dropped, "tonight, she just told me to go to bed. She didn't even look at me." Her words pierced me deeper than any document or passport ever could. Children don't analyze, they simply feel. I smoothed her hair gently, forcing a smile. "Maybe she's tired, honey." But inside, dread clawed at my ribs. That lullaby Marcus had once told me how I used to sing it when he was a boy, and I had taught it to Bianca years ago. But she had never sung it again, not once, not in all these years. Why now? Why only sometimes? Later, when Marcus excused himself to take a late phone call, I lingered in the hallway. Bianca's voice drifted from Lily's room, flat, distant. "Good night." No song, no laughter, just the creak of the door shutting. Moments later, Lily padded back down the hall, dragging her blanket. She climbed into my lap, her small arms curling around my waist. "Grandma," she whispered, "I like the nice mommy. But sometimes the mean mommy comes, and I don't like her at all." Her words made my blood run cold. I held her tighter, my eyes stinging. In her innocent language, she had spoken the truth I was too afraid to name. There wasn't just one Bianca living in this house. There were two. That night, as the house grew silent and Lily's breathing steadied against me, I opened my notebook. The pen trembled in my hand as I wrote. Tuesday night, Bianca sings lullaby, warm, affectionate. Wednesday night, cold, distant, no song. Lily notices difference. Each line on the page felt like carving suspicion into stone. I stared at the words until they blurred, my heart pounding against my ribs. Because if even a child could sense the fracture, then the truth was no longer a whisper in my mind. It was a scream. I had never kept a diary in my life, but that night, after Lily's trembling confession about her two mommies, I knew I couldn't keep dismissing these things as exhaustion or mood swings. I pulled out an old leather-bound notebook from the drawer in my nightstand, the one Marcus had given me years ago for jotting down recipes, and opened it to a blank page. The pen felt heavy in my hand, but I forced myself to write the truth as I saw it. Tuesday, Bianca sang lullaby, warm and affectionate. Wednesday, distant, cold, no song. Lily, confused, calls it mean mommy. I stared at the words. Once they were on paper, they couldn't be smoothed over by excuses. They stared back at me like evidence. The next day, I added more. Thursday, 3 p.m. Bianca left with red market basket, cheerful. Returned 6 p.m. with blue basket, irritable. I had asked casually, "Did you switch baskets?" She had smiled too quickly. "Yes, the old one broke." A friend lent me this. Her voice had been light, but her eyes were sharp, almost defensive. I wrote it all down. Friday, 9 a.m. left in white blouse, returned 11 a.m. in navy blouse, claimed stained, seemed rushed. I could still picture her face as she breezed into the kitchen with her shopping bags, her hair bouncing, her lips curved in that familiar smile. But when I asked about the change of clothes, the smile faltered for just a beat too long. By Saturday, the entries multiplied. Some days, embraces Lily with tenderness, other days, scolds her harshly for dropping a pencil. Inconsistent, extreme shifts, each note made my chest tighten further, as if I were building a case not against a stranger, but against my own daughter-in-law. That afternoon, I tried to distract myself in the garden, watering the daisies. The sun was warm, and the bees hummed lazily among the blossoms. But my mind wasn't in the yard, it was with the notebook inside, each line heavy as stone. When Bianca returned from the market, I watched her closely. She greeted me politely, "Good afternoon, Mom," but there was no warmth in her voice. Yesterday she had come back chattering about a bargain on cilantro. Today her words were flat, as if rehearsed. I forced a smile, but my stomach churned. I went back to my notebook, my hand shaking as I wrote, voice flat, no joy. Same, routine, different person. The more I wrote, the more the page filled with contradictions. Right hand versus left hand, white blouse versus navy, sweet lullabies versus sharp commands. By the time the sun set, my notebook was no longer a recipe book, it was an archive of unease. I sat back, staring at the neat lines of ink, and whispered into the silence of my room, if these are just coincidences, why do they feel like warnings? Asterisk. By Sunday, the weight of my notebook was unbearable. Every page I turned felt like a stone pressing deeper into my chest. I couldn't hold it all alone anymore. My hands shook as I dialed Carolyn's number. She had been my closest friend since our college days, the one person who could always tell when something was wrong, even before I said a word. "Elaine," she said warmly, "I knew you'd call. What's happened?" Her voice was the crack in the dam. Within minutes, I was sitting across from her at the corner cafe. The one with the creaky wooden booths and the smell of roasted beans that clung to your clothes. I slid the notebook across the table. My handwriting trembled across the pages, times, dates, moods, all scrawled in black ink. Caroline flipped through it slowly, her brow furrowing deeper with each entry. Finally, she looked up, her eyes sharp. "Elaine, these aren't just little slips. These are patterns. If it was just a mood swing, fine. But changing baskets, blouses, handwriting, you can't ignore this. I keep asking myself," I whispered, "what if I'm wrong? What if I hurt Marcus, or confused Lily even more?" Caroline leaned forward, gripping my hand. "And what if you're right? What if you stay silent and let this grow darker? Which risk can you live with?" Her words echoed in me long after we left the cafe. That afternoon, as if fate wanted to test my resolve, I ran into Mrs. Green on the street. She carried a plate of cookies wrapped in foil, her face hesitant. "Elaine," she said softly, "I hope you don't mind me asking, but has Bianca been different lately?" Yesterday she passed by, bright as ever, asking about my son's college. But today, I waved, and she barely glanced at me. It felt off. I forced a weak smile. Maybe she was in a hurry, but my heart thudded. It wasn't just me. Later, at the bakery, Mr. Johnson greeted me with his usual cheer, but as he rang up my order, he frowned. "Your daughter-in-law came in twice this week. First time, she laughed and told me my bread was the best she'd ever tasted. This morning, she looked me straight in the eye and didn't say a word, took her bag and left." His words stabbed like another nail in the coffin of denial. I left the shop with trembling hands, the warm paper bag clutched against my chest. Back home, I added their observations to my notebook, my pen scratching fast. Neighbors noticed, not just me. Multiple accounts. As the ink dried, I realized something terrifying. My private doubts had spilled into the world beyond my house. Others were seeing it too. This wasn't paranoia anymore. It was reality. Asterisk. The next Saturday began. Like so many others, Bianca came down the stairs in a pale yellow dress, her wicker basket swinging at her side. She smiled sweetly, her voice soft. "Mom, I'm going to the market for a bit. Do you want me to bring anything?" I forced a smile. "Just some fresh tomatoes, dear." She nodded and slipped out through the gate, her silhouette framed by the blazing Charleston sun. But this time, I didn't stay behind. I wrapped my old shawl around my shoulders, pulled the brim of my hat low, and waited a few breaths before stepping out. My pulse hammered in my ears. Each step I took felt like stepping into betrayal, but the need for truth was stronger than my fear. From a safe distance, I followed her down the familiar cobblestone street. The market was usually bustling by mid-morning, filled with vendors shouting prices, and the air rich with the scent of seafood and spices. But halfway down the street, Bianca did something strange. Instead of turning right toward the stalls, she paused, her head tilted slightly as if checking her. Then she turned left into a narrow alley I had never noticed before. I froze, my breath caught. The alley was shaded, flanked by peeling brick walls and rusted fire escapes. Laundry hung from windows overhead, swaying like ghostly banners. It was no place for errands. My heart pounded as I stepped quietly after her, hiding behind a row of parked bicycles. Bianca's pace was steady, almost deliberate. She moved deeper into the shadows until she stopped in front of a weather-beaten wooden door, marked with faded blue paint. I held my breath. As she knocked softly, 3 times, the door creaked open, and a figure inside beckoned her in. Without hesitation, Bianca slipped through, vanishing into the gloom. My knees weakened. My first instinct was to storm forward, to demand an explanation. But fear rooted me to this spot. What if she wasn't alone? What if she caught me? I lingered in the alley, every nerve alert. From within the building, I thought I heard muffled voices, a woman's laugh that didn't sound like the Bianca I knew, and a man's deeper murmur in reply. I stepped back into the sunlight, clutching the edge of my shawl as though it could steady me. My lungs burned with the weight of questions I couldn't answer. Where was this place? Who was she meeting? And if she wasn't at the market, what else had she been lying about? By the time I returned home, her wicker basket still vivid in my mind, I already knew I had crossed the line. I wasn't just doubting anymore. I was investigating. Asterisk. I barely slept that night. The image of Bianca slipping into that weather-beaten door replayed in my mind until the dawn light crept through my curtains. Every sound in the house, the creak of the stairs, the hum of the refrigerator made me jolt. I knew I couldn't rest until I returned to that alley. The next morning, I tucked my notebook into my purse, wrapped the shawl tightly around me, and walked with purpose. My steps echoed on the cobblestones, louder than I wanted. The market bustled behind me, but the moment I turned left into that narrow alley, the noise faded, replaced by a heavy silence that pressed against my chest. The door loomed ahead, its blue paint chipped and curling like old bark. My hand trembled as I lifted it to knock. 3 sharp raps, the same rhythm I had seen Bianca use. For a moment, nothing, just the faint smell of damp wood and frying oil from somewhere deeper in the alley. I nearly turned back until the door cracked open, and my world tilted. Standing before me was Bianca, or at least, that's what my eyes screamed. The same oval face, the same jet-black hair brushing her shoulders, the same almond-shaped eyes, but something was wrong. Her expression wasn't polished or confident, it was startled, almost fearful. And her clothes, plain jeans, a faded blouse so unlike the elegant outfits Bianca always chose. Bianca, the words slipped out before I could stop it. Her eyes widened, and she shook her head quickly. No, you're mistaken. Her voice was softer, edged with panic. My name is Bella. I staggered back, gripping the doorframe to steady myself. You look exactly like... My throat closed around the rest. She bit her lip, glanced nervously over her shoulder, and tried to shut the door. But before she could, a voice came from inside, calm and firm. Bella, don't hide anymore. She deserves to know. The door opened wider. Behind her stood another woman, slim with her hair pulled into a bun, her eyes steady but kind. She gave me a faint nod, as though she had been expecting me all along. Mrs. Carter, she said gently, please come in. It's time you knew the truth. I stepped over the threshold, my heart hammering so violently I thought it might crack my ribs. The dim light of the room swallowed me, and for the first time, I understood whatever secrets had been clawing at the edges of my family. They were bigger and darker than I had ever imagined. Asterisk. The room smelled faintly of disinfectant and stale coffee. An old man coughed weakly from a cot in the corner, his breath rattling against the cracked plaster walls. I stood frozen, my eyes darting between the timid young woman who looked exactly like my daughter-in-law and the steady-eyed stranger at her side. The stranger placed a gentle hand on the girl's shoulder. Mrs. Carter, this is Bella. She isn't Bianca. She never was. My mouth went dry. But she's identical. She could be her twin. Bella lowered her gaze, twisting a rag in her hands until her knuckles whitened. That's because I am. Her voice trembled, but each word dropped like a stone. Bianca is my twin sister. We were separated when we were babies. She found me years ago, and she used me. I gripped the back of a chair, my knees threatening to give way. Used you. How tears shimmered in Bella's eyes. She spoke quickly, as if afraid she would lose the courage if she paused. She told me I could step in for her sometimes simple things. Pretend to be her when she was too busy. Go to the market, watch Lily for an hour, smile at the neighbors. She said no one would notice. The other woman who introduced herself as Lucy, Bella's roommate, nodded grimly. At first, Bella refused, but her foster parents were very ill, and the medical bills were piling up. Bianca promised money, more than Bella had ever seen. I shook my head, disbelief warring with horror. So those days when she hugged Lily so tenderly, when she sang lullabies, that wasn't Bianca. Bella's tears finally spilled. That was me. I couldn't help it. Lily reminded me of the childhood I never had, but other times, when you saw her cold, angry, that was Bianca. She slipped in and out, covering her tracks, while I stayed behind, playing her shadow. I pressed my hand against my mouth, nausea rising. The entries in my notebook flashed before my eyes: left hand versus right hand, warm voice versus icy tone, the constant wardrobe changes. They weren't mood swings, they were two different women. Lucy leaned closer, her eyes fierce. Mrs. Carter, you need to understand. Bianca isn't just hiding another life, she's hiding a man, a wealthy investor named Grant Whitmore. Bella once saw them together at a hotel lounge. They weren't just acquaintances, they were lovers. That's why she needed Bella as her stand-in, to keep her double life seamless. My heart slammed against my ribs. Noah's voice echoed in my mind. She's in Tua, sitting with a man in a navy suit. The room blurred. I clutched the chair tighter to keep from collapsing. I had walked into this alley searching for answers. But what I found was a mirror. I wasn't meant to see two faces, one name, and a betrayal deep enough to shatter a family. Asterisk. When I stepped out of that alley, the Charleston sun felt harsher than ever, its heat pressing against my shoulders, yet I was trembling as if caught in a storm. Bella's words echoed with every step I took back home. Two faces, one name. Bianca isn't hiding a mood. She's hiding a life. By the time I reached the gate, my legs felt weak. I slipped inside, shut the door quietly, and leaned against it, trying to calm my racing heart. The house looked the same. Lily's crayons, scattered on the table, Marcus's jacket draped over a chair, but everything felt altered, stained by what I now knew. That night, I couldn't sleep. Each time I closed my eyes, I saw Bianca's face split into two, the polished daughter-in-law I thought I knew, and the tearful mirror of her sister, confessing in that dimly lit room. I pulled my notebook closer and began a new section at the back. This time, I wrote a single word across the top, evidenced at the entries tumbled out. Passport. Noah confirmed electronic record shows Bianca boarded flight to Paris. Need a copy. Manifest. Passenger list seat. Tua. Next to man in navy suit. Get details from Noah. Bank. Suspicious refinancing papers. POA signatures. Not mine. Must obtain copies. The pen dug so deep into the paper that it nearly tore. The next morning, I called Noah, my voice shaking but firm. Son, I need you to get me a copy of the passenger manifest. Anything that proves she boarded your flight. There was silence on the line. Then Noah's voice dropped to a whisper. Mom, are you sure you want to go down this road? I don't have a choice, I whispered back. I won't let her destroy Marcus, or Lily, or this family. He promised to help. Later, I walked to the bank under the guise of updating my account. My hands sweated as I asked the clerk for a review of any recent documents tied to my name. She pulled up files on the screen: loan inquiries, refinancing papers, power of attorney forms, and my breath caught. My name was there, but the signatures were not mine. Smooth, perfect strokes, but not my hand. I requested printed copies, my heart pounding so hard I was sure she could hear it. When I returned home, I slid the documents into a folder and locked them in my desk drawer. For the first time, my suspicions were no longer whispers in my head or shaky notes in a diary. They were facts, cold, heavy, undeniable. I looked at the folder, then at the family portrait on the wall. Marcus smiling, Bianca radiant, Lily giggling on his lap. A storm was coming, and I knew one thing with chilling certainty. When it broke, my house would never look the same again. The restaurant's chandeliers sparkled like frozen stars above the long mahogany tables. Marcus had invited us all to a dinner, celebrating the completion of his latest architectural project. The air was thick with laughter, clinking glasses, and the scent of rosemary lamb. I sat at the end of the table, my purse heavy on my lap, the folder of evidence tucked safely inside. My heart thudded with each beat of the jazz band playing softly in the background. Bianca was dazzling that night, her hair swept into an elegant knot, her sapphire dress shimmering under the lights. She charmed Marcus's colleagues with a laugh that sounded like crystal. To anyone else, she was perfection. To me, she was a mask waiting to crack. I waited until the dessert was cleared. My fingers trembled as I pulled the folder from my purse and set it on the table with a quiet thud. Marcus looked puzzled. "Mom, what is this?" I drew a shaky breath. "The truth, Marcus, the truth about your wife." The table hushed. Bianca's smile faltered, her eyes flashing briefly with something sharp. She tried to laugh it off. "Elaine, what are you doing? You're embarrassing yourself." I opened the folder, sliding out the first sheet. "The power of attorney document. This signature," I said, holding it up, "is supposed to be mine. It is not. Your wife has been falsifying documents to put this house, our lives, at risk." Gasps rippled down the table. Marcus's face drained of color. Before Bianca could speak, I pulled out the next piece. Noah's email with the passenger manifest. On the day she was here, in this house, she was also on a flight to Paris, seat 2A, next to a man named Grant Whitmore. My son saw her with his own eyes. Marcus slammed his fist against the table, his wine glass toppling and bleeding red across the white cloth. "Bianca, tell me this isn't true." Bianca's mask cracked. Her hands gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles whitening. "She's lying," she hissed. "Your mother has always hated me. She's inventing stories to turn you against me." But I wasn't done. I pulled out the final blow-up photo Bella had given me of Bianca and Grant, their heads bent close in a hotel lounge, time-stamped with the same evening she'd claimed to be home making dinner. The photo landed in front of Marcus like a dagger. His eyes darted from the image to Bianca, searching for an explanation that wasn't there. Around us, the room had fallen silent. Colleagues whispered, forks paused mid-air. Every eye locked on the unraveling of a woman who had built her life on deception. Bianca's breath came shallow, her face pale. For once, she had no words. And in that silence, Marcus finally saw what I had been forced to see for weeks. The woman he thought was his wife was nothing but a stranger in disguise. Asterisk, asterisk. The courthouse smelled of old wood and tension. The ceiling fans whirred softly above rows of benches packed with curious onlookers. Marcus sat stiff beside me, his face hollow but resolute. Noah leaned forward a few rows back, his pilot's uniform crisp, his jaw tight, and there, across the aisle, sat Bianca, her sapphire dress replaced by a tailored gray suit, her chin lifted in defiance. Even now, she radiated poised, as though sheer elegance might erase the mountain of evidence pressing against her. The judge, a stern woman with steel-gray hair, adjusted her glasses. "We are here to determine the validity of the documents presented, and the alleged misconduct involving Mrs. Bianca Rivera Carter." The bank's representative was the first to testify. He shifted nervously under the judge's gaze, admitting that Bianca had pressured him into processing the power of attorney documents. She insisted Mrs. Carter had authorized it. When I hesitated, Mr. Grant Whitmore personally assured me, I regret not verifying properly." Bianca's lips tightened. Next, Noah was called. He stood tall, his voice steady. "Your Honor, I was the first officer on Flight 784 to Paris. I personally witnessed Mrs. Carter board the flight. I found her passport near the gate and confirmed her seat assignment to it next to Grant Whitmore." He handed over the manifest. The clerk read aloud Bianca's name, printed in black and white. Bianca leaned toward her attorney, whispering furiously, but the whispers could not erase the paper in the judge's hands. Finally, the doors at the back of the courtroom opened. My breath caught as Bella stepped in, dressed plainly, her hair pulled back. She looked like a shadow of Bianca, but her trembling courage lit the room. Brighter than any chandelier, the bailiff swore her in. She clasped the Bible, then lifted her eyes to the judge. "My name is Bella Rivera. I am Bianca's twin sister. For months, she paid me to impersonate her, to shop, to greet neighbors, even to spend time with her daughter when she was elsewhere. She told me no one would ever know the difference." Gasps rippled through the gallery. Marcus's hands clenched on his knees, his knuckles white. Bella's voice cracked but grew stronger. I never meant to deceive anyone. I just needed money from my foster parents' medical bills. But when I realized she was using me to cover her offering, to falsify documents that could harm this family, I couldn't stay silent. She pointed across the aisle, directly at her sister. Bianca used me as her shield, but she cannot hide behind me anymore. The courtroom erupted whispers, stares, the judge pounding her gavel for order. Bianca's mask shattered completely, her face twisted, fury warring with panic, as she spat, lies, all of it. She's jealous of me, always has been, but no one believed her now, not with the manifest, not with the forged signatures, not with her twin sister standing there. The living proof of a double life unraveled, and as the gavel struck again, I knew the tide had turned. The woman who had haunted my house with two faces could no longer escape the truth. Asterisk, asterisk. The trial ended with Bianca's silence. The gavel struck one last time, and in that echo I heard the crumbling of everything she had built on lies. She left the courthouse flanked by officers, her eyes still blazing, but the spell was broken. No one saw a perfect wife anymore, only a fraud unmasked. Back home, the Carter house felt different. For weeks it had been heavy, suffocating, as though suspicion itself hung in the air. But now the rooms seemed to breathe again. Sunlight spilled freely across the hardwood floors, and for the first time in months, I could sit in the living room without feeling watched. Marcus was quieter, carrying the weight of betrayal like a stone in his chest. Yet slowly, I saw his shoulders ease. He poured himself into work during the day, but in the evenings, he sat on the porch with Lily, sketching houses together. I would hear their voices, his patient explanations, her delighted giggles, and feel a fragile but real hope returning. Lily, sweet child, carried scars of confusion. She asked less often about her mother, though sometimes her eyes searched the doorway at night. But she found comfort in small things, feeding the garden birds with me, holding Noah's hand when he came back from flights, curling against Marcus as he read bedtime stories. Stability was slowly stitching itself back into her world. And then there was Bella. She visited often, not as a shadow, not pretending, but as herself. She helped cook, helped with Lily's homework, sometimes just sat quietly in the kitchen while I knitted. Her presence, once the sharpest reminder of deceit, had become something healing. Lily called her Aunt Bella, and the joy in Bella's face when she heard it was something I'll never forget. One evening, I stood by the porch as the sky flamed orange over Charleston Harbor. Lily laughed inside the house, her voice mixing with Marcus's deeper tone. I closed my eyes and let the sound wash over me. My family had been shaken, fractured, nearly destroyed, but it was still here. Stronger, maybe, because the truth had burned away the lies. And to you, listening now, I want to say this. Trust is precious, but it should never blind you. Pay attention to the small signs, the shifted moods, the unexplained absences, the details that don't align. Sometimes they are nothing, but sometimes they are warnings that can save a family. Do not be afraid to seek the truth, even when it terrifies you, because truth, however painful, is the only soil where healing can grow. If you were in my place, would you have stayed silent for peace, or fought for the truth, no matter the cost? Tell me in the comments. Your story may be the light another person needs.